let's get started. So we are really thrilled to have you all here for the Can You Hear Me Clearly? The Dialogue Intelligibility Virtual Roundtable. Shall I say that again? Can you hear me clearly? The Dialogue Intelligibility Virtual Roundtable. I guess it is a good thing to check if everyone can hear me clearly. So if you can't, then pop it in the Q&A. But I think we've already done a little test route. It would be awkward if you couldn't, based on the discussion that we're having. I'm Sophie. I'm your host for today. I'm the CMO here at Nugent Audio. I'm a presenter, spending many years hosting gigs for So Far Sounds, alongside some other radio and voiceover work. And we are joined by our expert panel, Ozzy here, as a sound technology and post workflows manager at Netflix. Ozzy Sutherland is considered the company's go-to guy for pro audio and is known globally for his reputation in the industry. He has been involved in Dialogue Check's conception from the get-go. Thank you, Ozzy, for joining us.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. Happy to be here with y'all. So,
Thanks. And then, of course, the lovely Kate Davis. You are a multi-award-winning dubbing mixer, re-recording mixer, and head of audio Azimuth post-production in London. And on a personal note, those who know her know that she also has the best laugh in the biz.
Thanks. Just to demonstrate.
Yes, exactly. And Freddie, our very own product specialist here at NewGen, well known in the trade show circuit, and the front man for our content creation. Also touring musician and mastering engineer. Thank you, Freddie.
Pleasure to be here, as everyone else has said.
So tonight's discussion dives into why speech clarity is so crucial and often so tricky in post-production mixes. We'll explore what really drives audience complaints, maybe highlight best practices beyond relying on just automated tools, and get a kind of hands-on live demo of our new Dialogue Check plugin, which is developed in collaboration with Netflix. That measures intelligibility. I'm struggling with that word tonight. Intelligibility.
It's a tricky word. Yeah, we're going to see if you can pull it off.
By the end of this panel, fingers crossed, we can run it through Dialogue Check and see how it improves over the course of this.
It's one of those unfortunate words, a bit like how it's impossible to say halitosis without breathing on someone.
Very good.
Nice.
Thank you for your grace with that and humouring me. Now, I've done enough talking. I think it's time for the panel. So we're going to kick things off with Freddie. I'm going to start off with you for this question. What do we mean by dialogue intelligibility?
So in very basic terms, what we mean by dialogue intelligibility is dialogue intelligible, i.e., can it be understood? How easily is it understood? And there's a lot of factors that feed into what makes speech intelligible or unintelligible. Some of those are outside of our control. So, for example, if the speech in a TV show or film is in a language that the viewer doesn't understand, there's not a lot we can do about that. Or if someone is hearing impaired, again, unfortunately, that's outside of the audio engineer's control. But in both of those cases, obviously, you would generally use captions, subtitles. In a production context, I guess what we're really talking about is the aspects that we do have control over. So is the dialogue well recorded? That's obviously a lot earlier in the process than most of the people that are attending this evening. But also, is the dialogue clearly audible over music and effects? And is it well mixed in general? You know, if you're using like reverbs and things like that, have you completely washed it out so that all of the kind of transient detail of the speech is gone? And yeah, all those kind of factors. And some of the factors are sort of in between. It's not exactly in our control, but it's not completely outside of our control. If we're talking about like intelligibility versus artistic intent. So, for example, is it a problem if a character is speaking in an accent or a dialect that some viewers can't understand? There are things we can do to try and mix that in a way that is as helpful as it can be. But ultimately, if someone doesn't understand that dialect, they just don't understand that dialect. So there's, all these kinds of things to consider. And I think when we talk about dialogue intelligibility, it's important to not undermine the creative intent of like the writer or the director or the actors. So yeah, broadly, I feel like this is a conversation where we're trying to reach a consensus amongst all of those different people, and post-production editors and the viewer, to be fair, as well.
Yeah, team effort. Absolutely. I agree. Ozzy, you're nodding along. Would you like to add something to that?
Uh, I don't know. I was gonna let Kate go next, but I mean, if you think about it, I mean, I'm gonna put the Netflix hat on here, and at Netflix, the definition of dialogue intelligibility amongst all of us is like the degree to which like spoken words, and anything spoken is clearly heard and understood by the audience. Like that's the main thing is our audience. So without them having to rely on subtitles, volume adjustments, and like Freddie was just saying, it encompasses everything from clarity to enunciation to tonal balance to mix to signal to noise ratio, dynamics, everything, and how it sits in the mix overall too. So it's completely subjective at the end of the day. Like the way, and you can't take away from creative intent and all those things, but it's basically the the tools and the objective factor is what we looked at when we came into this with you all with dialogue check and understanding how to help improve the outcome of the different formats, the languages, and all the different devices. And
Is he
Just broken
frozen?
up there, Ozzy. Yeah.
oh my God,
Yeah.
what just happened there? Did I just go
We
away?
lost you for a second.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
crazy.
you've done the dialogue intelligibility definition so much that was just too much for you.
It
That was the
They
just
end of
it
muted
that.
crushed me.
you.
I think I said across formats, languages, and playback devices, and then it blew up on me. So, but yeah, I think to Freddie's point, it's very much at Netflix, the way we look at it is like, across a lot of the discipline, across everything. And it's the audience whose response we're looking at the most.
Yes. Yeah, great. Crucially, definitely.
Hmm.
And Kate, I know this is your passion, whether we have a wine in hand talking about this or not. Tell
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, dialogue has always been something. I mean, it has been my passion forever. I started in drama, dialogue editing, and I've always been pretty obsessed with the clarity of dialogue. I think most mixers that I know would agree. It's the most important part of a mix. Whether it's scripted or non-scripted, it's where the story lies and the information lies. And my job, I consider, is to make it as easy to hear and digest that information and that story as possible. If somebody's straining to hear, then I haven't done my job properly. And as Freddie said, that incorporates so many different, levels of, it's not all it's not all under my control. As you've said, we're talking about how things are source recorded, background noise, other elements, choice of music, positioning of music. And it's my job to make all of those elements of the mix sing and do their job properly. But yeah, it's about comprehensibility and ease of listening, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you do a very good job at it, Kate.
Well, thank you. I'm blinking hope so after all this time.
Hopefully dialogue check can help you even more. Not that you necessarily needed it, but just to removing those sections for you. Okay, I think that's given us a really good understanding. And of course, yeah, if anyone has any questions on any of that, you can always also email us. We're really open to hearing your thoughts. As Ozzy has said, we want to hear from the customers what they're feeling on this as well. So moving on to the next question. When TV and film viewers complain about not being able to hear dialogue properly, this is the issue we're coming back to all the time. What are they really complaining about?
So
Kate, do you want to?
one
Yeah. Oh, sorry,
example
Freddie, straight in there.
Oh, sorry, yeah. That one example I've been made aware of is Martin Harris, who's like Kate, is involved with
Mm-hmm.
AMPS, the Association of Motion Picture Sound. He was telling me that in his experience, a lot of the time, when viewers complain about dialogue intelligibility, the root cause has actually been poor choices of music. So not necessarily that the mix is bad, but actually that the choice of music either has been inappropriate or distracting in some other way, and that has been what's A, ruining someone's enjoyment, maybe if the music is just annoying, and B, making it harder to kind of parse what's going on. So I was kind of interested sort of to throw the question to Kate and Ozzy is well, I'll ask both of these questions, then I'll go to one of you and then the other. Does that match your experience at Netflix, Ozzy, when you receive complaints from people? And then Kate, are you aware of similar pitfalls in your own work which aren't necessarily directly related to intelligibility but impact the viewer's perception of that? So maybe Ozzy first, but kind of was using that as a
Interesting.
leading in example.
It is quite interesting. I remember that Martin quote. I think for us, it's very much based on the viewers and the audience. The number one complaint is I can't hear dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's a prevalent issue. Um, we have a lot of content, and it's across different genres, and it varies. So while you could say, oh, the music or the effects too dynamic, this is what's happening, from what we're seeing and what we're noticing, it's a lot of things. It's a muddied up production sound that happened. It's mumbling performances. It's different language mixes. It's the mix is way too dynamic. For a home environment. It's the music and effects just pushing way too much and then drowning things out. So it's like we see everything. We get to see like all the different caveats that can create this issue. But I think the thing that we believe is that this issues can be mitigated for sure. Once you really think out the workflows, you get the creative alignment, the buy-in with the production, you start conversations earlier. It's not about just loudness across the whole thing. It's not about how loud you can make it. It's about the balance, the priorities and the choices you're making as you go along. And that starts with conversations and communication with everyone from pre-production and production right down to that final delivery. So while we can always say it's like, oh, the music is too much or it's a choice and things like that, I think there's so many complex nuances and little issues that we have to take a bigger holistic view over the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wise words.
Yeah, I think I obviously totally agree. I think the result of all of these decisions that are made along these lines is that somebody can't understand the dialogue. There's obviously three elements to a mix. There's the dialogue, there's the sound effects, and the music, and all of those can occupy the same similar frequencies and obviously clash and cause these, the times when you can't hear dialogue properly. We're all, as a mixer, we're all striving for the perfect mix, and we're striving for that moment when all of those elements can do their job as brilliantly as possible, with your dialogue still cutting through. As I've said, dialogue to me has always been the king, the most important thing, or the queen. And so, that's what we strive for. We have to embrace the idea of it being the music being too loud, poorly chosen, occupying those same frequencies, vocals that get in the way. The way it's been edited, if there's a sound effect that needs to be there that clashes with the dialogue, I do a lot sometimes of time compressing dialogue when it's out of vision and moving stuff around to make space for those sounds, because you want everything to be able to be strong enough to be doing its job, and the effects to be bringing it to life, the music to be bringing the emotion and the tension and not apologizing for itself, but the dialogue has to cut through. So yeah, you're right. Conversations, sound recordists need to be given the space and the respect to do their job properly. editing, it's we are the end result, and I think it's easy for people to point the fingers or think that it's a poor mix, but actually, as we've discussed, there's many different elements to why the dialogue might not be as clear as possible. Enunciation, projection, and in drama you get the chance to ADR, post sync these things, but in the world that I mostly occupy, non-scripted, you get what you're given, and that can be difficult.
And you pray after you get what you've given. Yeah.
How much scope do you feel like there is? I guess this isn't your world necessarily, Kate, but how much scope do you feel like there is for the engineers that are actually there on set to express their concerns about whether something maybe isn't being enunciated well enough or isn't being mic'd up in the right way or whatever?
Do you mean as a production sound mixer, as the sound recording team?
Yeah, sorry, I maybe didn't express myself.
Oh, no, it's fine, just clarifying. I think we're in a sort of difficult transition period with all of these noise reduction. There's now so much that can be done that I feel there's a line where a lot of directors from the colleagues and friends that I have that work in drama, there is an element of directors and producers know what can be done in post. They'll fix it in post. I say a lot, it's not my world, so I don't want to make those judgments, but I think there are occasions when people will not allow you to go again, whereas they might have done a number of years ago. I think it's I don't know, really. I don't know.
Is that partly due to budget cutting and things like this?
Yeah,
are we
exactly.
still the afterthought in this world, even with the mic placement and the
I think, and also with the ability to record ADR, I think there's some directors that are all about performance and they would not want to use any ADR, and I think they would probably be in a position to be making sure that they respect that department and go again. But yeah, I suppose there's more that can be picked up and re-record. Obviously you can create a soundtrack from nothing, if you have the time and the ability to do that. But yeah.
I will always come back to when I first got into this industry, the fact that people kept saying, you only notice audio when it's bad. We are the unsung heroes.
Yes, I've written that down. Yeah, it's a bit of a thankless
Maybe you were the one that said it to me, but all those years ago. I'll give you that.
Sometimes you work so hard to make something and it just goes over the head and you have to go, done my job well.
Yes, it's true. Okay, anything else to add to that? Or shall I move on? So you've brought in a little bit about here. We keep using the words loudness and clarity, but how are dialogue clarity and loudness related?
You want me to go? Oh,
yes.
I feel like everyone's looking at me for some reason, but even though we're on Zoom. No, I think I think it often gets mistaken. Clarity and loudness. So I think dialogue clarity is definitely often mistaken for with loudness. I mean, loudness is one thing. Like for instance, I know we have our spec, -27 dialogue anchored spec at Netflix. The main reason for that is to ensure consistent playback across multiple titles. So if you're doing 6 or 8 episodes and you did this all in spec, it should all be consistent. The loudness spec across that should go consistently so people don't have to sit there raising and lowering the volume and doing all those things. So I think the true intelligibility aspect of dialogue intelligibility comes from dynamic range, EQing, masking, micro level mixing choices, like what Kate would do. So it's I think people think of loudness too much as it's not a solution, it's a tool, really, at the end of the day. And the big idea around even just us working with you all with dialogue check, it's like a step 2 after the loudness, in a way. It's so you can go beyond loudness and help you visualize the intelligibility of what you've just done across the different scenes, across the mix, across the languages, and just how loud it is to be heard in a way. So I, sometimes it's like people think, oh, the loudness is not hitting the right way, but the dialogue could be loud and still unintelligible of what was said,
Hmm.
So I think that's something we just have to distinguish, like, as much as possible, that loudness is one thing, and it's like, over time, and it's creating consistency, whereas like intelligibility is many different factors which we're trying to clearly see or check in a way, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Thanks, Ozzy.
Kate, I'm gonna look at you on this.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's always striving for the perfect mix, isn't it? I'm pleased that you have a dialogue anchor in your spec, because I find the Rec 128 frustrating to not have an anchor of dialogue. Because if you have a mix that's, I've had music programs with, big, strong wall-to-wall music all throughout, which come up loud, or something about a fighter jet that's with really strong music. And I would have appreciated a dialogue anchor in that, so that I'm not having to turn it down, or, I wouldn't want to compromise the mix. But then you're back to the point when people potentially are turning tellies up and down, not dramatically, but
But enough to get you out of the storyline, or we
well,
talk about
possibly.
immersive.
It's frustrating, because I wouldn't adjust my mix to only make it pass for loudness, but if without the anchor there, it can be difficult to make it pass. So I'm pleased that Netflix has dialogue anchor. But yeah, as Ozzy said, it's, you can have loud dialogue that you can't hear. It goes back to everything we've discussed about accents and background noise and all of these elements. So it's all connected. But yeah, the perfect mix.
Mm. And Freddie, anything to add there?
Not a huge amount. I feel like Ozzy and Kate have covered most of that. I suppose, yeah, my sort of thoughts on it are, I think it's interesting trying to occupy this middle ground, because I think ignoring the specs that we are all expected to work towards, a really loud mix is probably going to be a mix without much dynamic range, which, regardless of how well mixed it is probably going to negatively impact intelligibility. But similarly, a really, really dynamic mix, particularly once you're out of like a cinematic environment, is going to be really hard to kind of pass as well. So yeah, I think trying to occupy that middle ground. And as Kate says, I think having a dialogue anchor, like in the Netflix spec, is really useful in that regard, because it does mean that even if some of the content on Netflix, which, to be fair, this is true, I don't know why I've said if, some of the content on Netflix is really cinematic and has a really wide dynamic range. So at least having that consistency of the dialogue loudness means that someone's presumably going to be able to hear the dialogue equally well between a really dynamic program and a not so dynamic program. Although I guess, yeah, you still kind of get the like earth shaking sound effects or whatever, but that's part of the excitement. I don't necessarily know if that's a problem. And yeah, it's interesting as well to kind of touch upon the fact that dialogue check is, as Ozzy says, kind of a part two to the Netflix best practices with that -27 dialogue anchor. Obviously, we worked with Netflix around that time as well. We introduced the dialogue gated loudness and the dialogue LRA into VisLM, and to my knowledge, that's still pretty widely used. So yeah, it's always a good thing to kind of for development of these kinds of tools to be like a back and forth, a dialogue, if you will, between
Oh dear.
I was wondering when the first
the
one would come.
manufacturer and the
They dropped the joke.
It had to be Freddie.
Yep.
I don't know if we're really ready for clear dialogue. I think we've all got so used to, the kind of hearing range that we have. Are we really ready? I'm not sure. Well, to be continued
Do
on
you
that front.
think it is completely that bad, Ozzy? Like, this whole discussion about subtitles, I find quite frustrating, because we listen. It's a different world now of people concentrating, and to fall back on more people using subtitles. I mean, you've done the research, that's why I'm interested to see what you say, but do you think it's that bad, or are we just able to be having more conversations about it?
I mean, I'll go and say, like, even in the beginning of my career, for instance, like I think one of the first things I ever heard in a stage was, I'm not going to name the mixer who said it to me because he's still around. He's pretty, everyone knows him too. Um, but it was like I was all about like, oh, the music and the effects, it's so cool, everything. And then like no one cares about that. They want to hear the dialogue, they want to understand the story, they want to do this. And I'm like, aha. And that was like a very much a eye-opening thing as a young 24, 25-year-old in the room with all these mixers and editors and stuff. And I was like, dialogue, this is important. Like, this is definitely important. All the sound effects and everything are so cool. But I think over time, as viewing habits have changed, environments have changed, and the aspect in which people consume, we definitely have seen it become an issue. It is still, a number one complaint amongst the audience. And it was something you were just mentioning before, both of you, was like, how how we kind of like mix and try to create a perfect mix. But I think it also comes back to having how you check those mixes and knowing who your audience is. And in some cases, what you see still is like, why are you in a theater trying to mix this? And this is going to be viewed with a lot of people watching it on a laptop, phone, different devices, and not checking the dynamics of your mix in the correct ways. Um, and then also just thinking that it'll just automatically be fixed or something would happen to it. But at the end of the day, what we're doing here is creative integrity and creative intent. Like, we don't try to take anything away from what the creatives are doing. So what you get is what you get. And that's important for us because, at the end of the day, there's still storytellers trying to tell the story and give you their interpretation of what they're trying to do. And you don't want to take away from that at all. So while it is an issue, I think it's been escalated more to the forefront in the past, like 2 to 3 years. I feel like in the last 2 to 3 years, it was definitely through COVID, basically. It
Yeah,
got escalated as people consumed way more
yeah, yeah.
content during that time. And now it's to a point where it's like, well, how come this is still an issue at this point? It's like,
Mm.
well, we can look at all the reasons, and I think that's the great part is we can start the dialogue, um, and and have more conversations around this. And then as you start looking at things like production and post and everything, we don't want you to keep getting the blame, Kate. Like, we don't need you to keep getting the blame at the end of the day. Like, it's not your fault, and we can find where those middle ground and areas are where we can help uplift, change things, and move things forward so that it progresses everything. So you have more time to be creative and not micro, syllable
Yeah.
fixing dialogue.
I mean, I always make sure that I listen on various different, mediums. I know that my mixes sound good on headphones, on little speakers, on big speakers. That's very important to me and my colleagues, and the people I talk to about that. So I just wondered, whether it's, well, yeah, I just wondered the percentage, whether that has got more. But like you say, if the content, if the amount that people are consuming has got more, then I suppose that's going to be relative to that. I've just answered my own question.
It's interesting. Sophie kind of alluded to earlier the fact that audio, unfortunately, in the film and TV industry, audio is often kind of an afterthought. And I wonder if you were saying, Ozzy, about no one actually cares about music and effects. They just want to understand the dialogue. Is that a byproduct, do you think, of audio already being such an afterthought that people are just like, as long as I can understand the dialogue, I don't care about anything else. Is that
No, I think
explained?
that the way I was saying that is like that was just based upon that quote in the room at the time. I mean,
Mm.
the everyone cares about the music and effects and how that drives the story. I think it was just like, but if you can't hear the dialogue in that moment in the story, then
Absolutely.
you've lost the audience and you've lost that person. So
Oh,
that was like it was one of those odd quotes being thrown at you in a room, and you're like, oh, I'm scared, and then you're like, oh, I understand what you mean by that. Like,
mm,
and if the director and the story and the whole thing is not understood, and you just drown it, if it wasn't for artistic effect, like you just lost everyone in that moment, or maybe it's on purpose. You maybe did want to lose them in that moment, and that's intentional, and that's okay too. But you have to be able to build to that point and get to that point and not lose everyone as you go along.
Mm.
Yep.
Mm. Yep, agreed. Thank you for that. Interesting part of that discussion. I think that was needed. Um, so how are we actually expecting Dialogue Check itself to fit into people's workflows as the plugin becomes hopefully more widely adopted?
So I guess the really important thing, and we say this about a lot of our products, is that it shouldn't become a replacement for a good mix. The example I always use is, I won't name names, but there was someone at a trade show a couple of years ago who basically told me that he had to ban his team from using LM Correct because they were essentially using it to get mixes that passed QC but weren't actually mixed, essentially. So Dialogue Check shouldn't become a replacement for a good mix. I guess the way that I'm expecting it to fit mostly into people's workflows is primarily as a bit of a tiebreaker when you've got multiple people in a room working on a mix, having quote unquote an objective opinion from dialogue check can be really helpful. If someone thinks that the dialogue is perfectly intelligible, someone else doesn't, you can use that as a tiebreaker. It also just means if you're working on your own, it saves you from having to like open the door to the studio, see if someone happens to be walking down the corridor and like get them to come and be like, tell me, is this intelligible or not? Kind of helps with that. And also something you can point towards to like quell a fussy director or a fussy executive producer, where it's like, there is literally no more scope for me to make this any more intelligible than it is, and someone won't drop it. I guess ideally you can be like, well, it's reading 97 on dialogue check or whatever. So those are some of the examples of where I'm expecting it to appear, is more as like a kind of a tiebreaker, and a bit of like a sanity check when you're at the end of, you've been in the studio for 10 hours, your ears are fatigued, you no longer have that kind of you don't trust your ears anymore. It's the end of the day. You're like, okay, let me just check what dialogue check's saying to make sure that I've not completely ruined this. But
And
yeah,
with teams being smaller now as well, we had a bit of problem with Mumblegate. It was all over, BBC and things like that, with the same person checking the dialogue as was involved in some of the script writing even. So kind of having that, when the teams are smaller like that, having that objective view in it is really important. I know, Kate, this was something that you were quite concerned about when Dialogue Check was first introduced into the world. So have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly clever, and I'm very happy to say that all of the mixes that I've put through it of mine have come out very green and strong.
Gold
So
star.
it's very clever, and it is reassuring to see that it's come out with the same result as I have come to with my ears and my brain and my experience. I think a concern for me and a number of mixers in my world is that we have always considered ourselves the dialogue check. So it feels so at the moment I don't see myself incorporating it into my template and my day-to-day workflow. But saying that, I think I will find it very useful for doing international versions until there's a point where I am required to QC have it in my workflow. I like I say, my ears and my brain and my dialogue check. But I see a lot of uses for it in reversioning, foreign language. I would certainly use it for that. And edit, I think it'd be brilliant for edits, straight to air situations where editors are doing their own mixes and things, and they haven't got access to everything that we have access to. At the moment, I'm just at that point of like coming to terms with the fact that a plugin is telling me or is able to tell me how my mix sounds. And you have assuaged, if that's the right word. I don't think I've ever used that word out loud, but hearing you talk tonight, Ozzy and Freddie, has made me think a lot more about that. And your intent in making it seems very valid and from the right place, if that makes sense. So I've got a lot more thinking to do about it now, but that's been my initial thing, is like, I'm the dialogue check.
Don't you tell me what to do.
I don't think you're wrong in that. I think that was the initial jerk reaction to all of us when we were talking about it. But I think, you know, the way we kind of envisioned it here at Netflix too was, it's like a flexible second opinion. You know, it's just like for a tool that's out there, and it's a real time or offline tool. Then you can use it. So it's giving the mixers or editors an insight or visibility into the intelligibility. Like if you have blind spots, because you've been sitting, you know it more than anyone. As a mixer or editor, you know the material more than anybody else. But you've also been on the material for 18 hours or 20 hours, and you might be losing your mind a little bit too. And it's like, am I hearing this or am I not hearing this? And then, you know, so it's like to find those blind spots in the creative process. But at the end of the day, it's not replacing your ears or your taste. It can't replace your ears or taste or the vision of the creative. So it's basically there as a flag for like QC. Especially now, you're seeing multi-language shows and films with multiple languages being spoken in them. You know, fast turnaround content like you're dealing with a lot of the time. So you could integrate the tool into like a pre-dub workflow. Some might lean on it towards the end, like QC, just to give yourself a sanity check of dialogue check at the end, even though you know you're in spec and everything, and it's like, let me just see something and just run it through it and see what it says. And then you can even use it as a production planning tool, like in the early stages. So at the end of the day, we're trying to find a way to reduce, you know, everybody's reliance on like being like reactive to fixes and be proactive to like getting the insight or fixing earlier or finding the solutions earlier. And I think it's definitely that second opinion, second option kind of thing. Never to replace any of you and your ears, but you know, there's only so many of us also at Netflix. We can't listen to everything. We can't check everything. We can't know that. So we're relying on all of you to use whatever tools you have at your disposal to make sure it's going to come in the right way and be the best presentation of that to the audience.
I think we have to
work. Oh, sorry, you go ahead, Kate.
Thanks, Freddie. I think as an industry, we have to work very hard to keep it as that sanity check thing. I don't want junior mixers coming in and mixing, learning to mix by looking at that and being told that dialogue is clear. As long as it doesn't become a, you know, like with VisLM, which is you know, I use every single day. If there's a point where you start mixing to loudness by watching that, and you're mixing to loudness, then it's going to sound rubbish. You know, that's what I just want to make sure as an industry we keep that. We try and keep it as that sanity check and not as the people mixing by watching that.
Yeah, we've got some work to do from a marketing perspective then to make sure that maybe the next campaign we do have to say sanity check in there.
No, I think Freddie has mentioned that a lot, and I think that's important. And again, the whole thing about the subtitles, we need to make sure that we acknowledge as an industry that it's a lot to do with viewer changes as well as technology. Does that make sense? No.
I'm with you.
I think it's worth noting as well, just while we're talking about it being a useful tool for mixing in other languages, if you've already mixed in English and then you're mixing in a language that you don't understand, we have tested dialogue check on a whole bunch of different languages and we get consistent results versus English. I believe the algorithm was trained on, I want to say it was English, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, and Korean. I think, but then it's been tested on way more.
Yeah, we've tested it on way more than that. Yeah,
I've tested it on Arabic and it was brilliant, and it was, that was really reassuring, because although my experience and my ears and brain, as I've mentioned a million times, it I can tell. I hope that I can tell that you can hear that. To have that was reassuring for me. It was great to see it work on Arabic as well.
Amazing.
That's good feedback. Thank you. So we're kind of talking about, we don't want AI to be taking our jobs, etc., all the time anyway in life. However, what skills should engineers try to hone in order to avoid completely relying on tools like dialogue check?
I suppose, as we've skirted on, for me, it's obviously listening, mixing hours, listening, and making sure, like, checking everything or listening to everything on all the different formats, and finding your ears, I guess. And as we've discussed as well, the everything, learning how to use EQ and being able to balance all of the different elements in the frequency world to be able to let everything have its space. Listening for me.
Yeah. I was going to say, you took the words right out of my mouth. Critical listening. I mean, it's like 101 for all of us. It's like critical listening, being able to, it's like your ears are everything at the end of the day. And it's why you're in this business, and it's why you've been gifted to be great or do what you're doing. So you have to develop your ears too. And, it's all about the nuances of like using those skills when you're a mixer or a dialogue editor, and understanding all those nuances, dynamic control, EQ, matching things, your audience playback's behavior, what they're gonna like, paying attention to the world around you. There's nothing better than paying attention to the world around you, and that encompassing you and as a sound professional, because that takes you into the world even more to help tell the story too. So, and to back to Kate's point, we don't want people to rely on this as like, oh, this is what you use and you see it's perfect. It's like, no, that's not. You can't just use a tool. It's just like if you're using tools right now to just auto match something or automatically do this, it might get you there somewhat, but it's not going to get you there the full 100%. You still got to find a way to carve this to fit. But and it won't ever replace like emotional clarity on something, to add emotion to something or give that. So it's about it becoming, you can't just look at it on a meter. You have to still make it feel intelligible, and once you make it feel intelligible, it should measure intelligible.
Yeah.
And if you're right there, it's like, and if you feel like it's off, it's like, oh, maybe I do need a different take. Maybe I do need to try something else here. I'm missing something that's making it, be a missed line or something. But yeah, critical listening, your ears, that's everything still.
Trust your ears. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know we were just talking about, how we need to maybe put forward this as sanity check, etc. It shouldn't be a replacement. Maybe we can do that in some of the marketing side of things, etc. However, this reminds me also of the discussion at MPTS in London, when Nick Fry mentioned we have to give those who are just starting out, the young uns who are just cutting their teeth in this world, we have to give them some opportunities so that they can have that listening time already, so that they're learning on the job, rather than just because otherwise these values, if we call them values, are not going to be flowing through and coming, so that the reliance is going to be on, if we're not giving them that airtime and the listening time to start off with. So I think that's a really
it's a real
useful point.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. It's a really important point that a lot of us are talking about at the moment. Like, as you mentioned, Sophie, like we're one person dubs most of the time now. We don't have an assistant sat next to us the whole time. And that's how I learned, was from years of sitting next to a mixer and, getting to the point where I knew why they'd press stop before they told me. And, that's really lacking now. And I fight really hard to have my assistant dubbing editor sit in as much as possible, but sometimes that's not possible because of budgets and everything, and it's something we really need to work at,
wherever we can, giving those opportunities to those who are coming through to keep that quality, as and when we flow up the pipeline, so to speak.
When I go deaf.
Yes, that's it. Okay, great. Freddie, did you want to add anything more to that?
No, this was, I think, the one question that I didn't really have much to say about. So
that's quite all right.
Just because it's not my world as much. I feel like me giving advice for what skills engineers need to hone would ring a bit hollow.
Thank you for your honesty.
It was just going back really quickly. It was lovely saying that, Ozzy. Like, one of the first things somebody said to me when I was training to be a dubbing editor was listen to the world around you. I rarely wear headphones when I'm wandering around. I just love to hear, I'm so inspired by the bin truck over there. Freddie just mentioned there was an ice cream van outside beforehand, and the way nature works with our environment, where nature sits sound wise in our environment. I find that really inspiring. So it was lovely to hear you say that as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
What do the ice cream vans near you sing, Kate?
Say that again, sorry.
What do the ice cream vans near you play? It's Green Sleeves, the one around
I think it's Green Sleeves around me as well, yeah.
Well, there we go.
I went all Brummy then. Can't remember what the Brummy ones are. Black Sabbath, maybe.
Very good. So is there anything else that you guys want to bring up and discuss amongst, or give advice to anyone else that is in attendance to this before we move on to the demo?
I
feel like we could maybe do the Q&A before the demo. There's been some really interesting
There has
questions.
actually, and very relevant to what we're building on here. Freddie, is there anything that come to the front of mind for you?
Let me just have a quick look, remind myself.
So the first one was Mark saying, is there an age limit where this is an issue? Are we talking about maybe age limit in terms of when your hearing goes, or maybe even...
my interpretation of that is that he's talking about, do these kind of complaints become more common beyond a certain age when people's hearing has deteriorated? Look, based on the statistics I've looked into and read about, I don't know actually if it is that correlated with age, but Ozzy,
no, it's not just age. Yeah, I mean, I turn stuff up and down still at home, and
not on Netflix though, surely.
You'd be surprised. No,
diplomatic.
No, but I mean, I think it happens to everyone in one way, shape, or form. So it's yes, it can be like with a specific demographic, but for the most part, we're not just seeing it like with one specific demographic.
I think Craig Duncan has kind of added to that as well, and mentioned that he says he's read articles on sites like Production Expert that have found that young people in their early 20s, presumably with good hearing, saying that they turn on subtitles as they can't understand the dialogue. I guess there's so many factors with that. The examples I always give are things like, as audio engineers, we don't have any kind of control over the environment someone's watching in. Yeah. And particularly young people might be living in like low-cost rental housing where they can hear like next door's dog, and like their like washing machine or dishwasher is like right next to where the TV is, and all this so many factors like that. I would posit that that's more of a factor than age.
I think also YouTube has trained a generation to automatically have them on, and people concentrate in a very different way because of that. If they're there, you kind of look at them, don't you? I find it hard to, if they're on screen, then hard to not look at them. Have you heard about this thing as well with the noise cancelling headphones are making people not be able to hear and tune into?
Because they're so
Because they're so
used
used
to
to
Yeah,
it being
that it's actually
perfect.
tricking the brain into not listening properly.
They need to listen to that Bin
Interesting.
Man and the ice cream van,
Yeah,
don't
they
they?
do. I mean, that's a
It-
frightening thought, isn't it?
That
That
is frightening.
evolution is making our brains not hear anymore. People
Mm.
think they're going deaf when they're not.
Yeah. And
yeah.
listening from such a young age to perfect quality, on your AirPods going through, even just a voice note or a phone call, we can access it so much better than how we used to. So that training from such a young age, which we didn't used to have at all, did we? You had to have a lot of money to be able to have the perfect speaker set up in your house, didn't you, before?
Yeah.
You did. You did.
A question that
Yep.
I'm really intrigued to get Ozzy's answer from is this one from Marco Vermas, who said,
Uh-huh.
have any devices been prominent in the dialogue complaints? I assume what he's meaning is, do you get that data when you have complaints at Netflix? What device
No.
are you watching on? Or if not, does anyone mention it in their complaint? And has there been any kind of correlation
No.
noticed?
It's just I can't hear this.
Damn.
And it's a complaint. And
Yeah.
you can it's not based upon a device, it's not based upon any of that information. It's based upon, oh, there's about 100 complaints on this exact thing from 100 different people. Okay, there's a problem. There's an issue there, or thousands of people or something have said something. It's not based upon like that. It's like they've all noticed this one issue and said something about that same issue. So and I think that's the thing. We're doing what we do here is we're sending the highest quality audio possible to everyone, but we don't have any control of what's happening at the end of it once you get it. So you get highest possible Atmos stream, stereo stream, everything, high quality audio. How you consume it is completely up to you and on the device that you're consuming it on. But the information we're looking at is, oh, they're actually complaining about something, and it's not related to their device. This is coming from the content itself.
I think you've muted yourself, Sophie.
Yeah, I'd be beside myself if I got 100 complaints about my sound. My Uncle Terry, I always used to pride myself because Uncle Terry used to watch everything with subtitles, but he didn't watch my programs with subtitles. He could hear them. So I was like, I'm doing all right.
Incredible.
Uncle Terry can hear it.
Yeah.
Maybe we could have a nod to Terry in dialogue check when it's in the Terry zone.
Can you have one of your settings? One of your default settings could be Uncle Terry.
Yeah.
On the dialogue check.
I can see a few questions coming in more about the how it works. And we're going to go through the demo, obviously, which will hopefully answer some of those questions. Have you guys scrolled through any more that you'd like to answer prior to that?
Somebody made me laugh talking about Christopher Nolan.
Yes.
I won't comment.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we probably don't quite have time for all of them. But what if I do the demo while I'm doing that, Kate and Ozzy can have a look, see if there are maybe one or two more that we want to go over. So yes, bear with
that
me
sounds
1 second.
great. Thank you.
Okay. So hopefully, just to confirm, you can't see my notes, can you? Because that would be embarrassing.
No, you're fine.
Good. Okay, so this is dialogue check. What you might notice is that this is actually on Media Player, just because I decided it was easier because Pro Tools gets really fussy about sharing audio on Zoom. So don't worry, this is genuinely me using dialogue check, but it was me using dialogue check last week. Before I play the video, as well. Actually, I should make sure that I'm sharing audio. Bear with me. Okay, there we go. So it should be self-explanatory, or mostly self-explanatory for anyone who's used VisLM before. Obviously, it's likely to be quite similar people using it. The history view is very similar. But what we're actually measuring, well, someone asked what the metric is. The metric is actually based on something developed by Fraunhofer over in Germany. They made this meter called the listening effort meter, which only runs in Nuendo, which is why we were then asked to make something that would be cross-compatible on all kinds of different platforms. But they came up with this measurement of listening effort, which is actually on a scale of 0 to 13, with 13 being the most difficult to understand. We've essentially used that listening effort, but we've flipped it and we put it on a scale of 0 to 100 because we felt like that was more helpful. And what that's actually based on is 2 neural networks which have been trained on sort of quote unquote good mixes, clear mixes. But we have also found that generally things that read highly positively on dialogue check also correlate with real people. We'll show these clips to real people and they will say that it's intelligible as well. It's not kind of based on nothing, but it is sort of this nebulous thing. It's not like a sort of one of the kind of main scientific, I can't even think of the term for the sort of primary scientific measurements for things. It is this listening effort that's been developed by Fraunhofer. So you've got the green zone sort of here at the top, which is anything above 60. Ideally, what you're hoping for is for an entire mix to be within that green zone. I'm going to play something through this. I have slightly sped up some of the ballistics just in order to give slightly more kind of busy information in order to kind of demonstrate more clearly what's happening. In the kind of standard dialogue check settings, you actually wouldn't be getting as much of kind of a busy reading as this. I just thought it was helpful, especially because I didn't want to necessarily show like a bad mix and be showing someone up. So this is actually quite a well-mixed program. I'm going to play a short clip from the rehearsal just because it's what I've been watching recently. But I thought this was a really interesting clip because it's got a few different types of voice in it. So this is a program presented by Nathan Fielder. You've got Nathan's voiceover. You've also then got Nathan in the room. You've got someone on the phone that you're hearing through his phone speaker. But then eventually he walks down the corridor into the room with that person, at which point you've got the crosstalk of their voice coming out of the phone and then being sat there in the room. And then finally just hearing her voice directly. And you'll notice as I play it through, the intelligibility reading going up and down, kind of relating to that. Like I said, this is pre-recorded, but hopefully it'll be interesting. Why can I not click on the play icon? Here we go. Sophie, wave at me if I start playing this and there's no audio coming through, but I think there will be.
When I got back to Los Angeles, I contacted the media team for United Airlines to see if they'd give me special access.
You said this is for HBO?
HBO, yeah. And the focus of the project is aviation safety. So, we're really trying to make a somewhat sincere effort to explore and develop new ways to improve pilot communication in the cockpit. So that's the main thrust of the project.
Okay. Could you tell me more about the project? You said somewhat sincere?
Well, I only say somewhat because it's a television show, so we're also trying to make it entertaining. So there's dual goals, I guess.
Okay. And you said it's a documentary?
Yeah. I mean, I would use that term loosely, but yeah.
Like, when you say that it is hybrid, you mean... I'm just trying to get a sense of the tone and what the end product is going to look like. We're happy to work with media projects. We just want to make sure.
I think that's good. Yeah, I think I'm going to call them for real now.
Okay.
But thank you. Yeah, great.
Yeah, of course.
So to be clear, what he's doing there is rehearsing a conversation with the United Airlines media team. But I think what's interesting there is that you can see the voiceover is super, super clear, hitting like 100. Then when he's in the room, it's slightly less clear. The voice over the phone is much, much less clear. And then when you've got all the crosstalk, it kind of loses it completely. But that's hopefully a kind of useful demonstration of what audio actually looks like being passed through dialogue check. I'm guessing that might have brought up a few more questions as well. So yeah,
It might.
I don't know if you.
It might well have, but yeah, we're looking at. I'm just aware of time as well, just to be conscious of this. Definitely, I would say we can pick out a couple more, but this we're on the hour mark, and I don't want people to be rushing away from things. Obviously, we love to take up your time and love to think you're so interested that you can't leave. But yeah, so if there's a couple more, then let's do those. And then my proposal will be that we can answer some of these questions maybe in more of a FAQ section. And you can always email my personal email, sophie@nugentaudio.com, if there is any burning questions. But I think some of these questions that you've put there are really good for other people to know of. So we'll do a little social series to answer them some more. Kate, Ozzy, any others that come up that are really, really useful to answer right now?
I don't think so. For me, I think you've answered some with the demo. Ozzy, did you spot any? I mean, somebody asked about what you would put through it, and I'm assuming whether you'd put the DX or things separately. But I'm assuming you would just put the full mix through, because otherwise
it would be the full mix.
Relationship with everything else would not.
Yeah, you put the full mix through it, but for the most part too, we also tested it with just like straight dialogue stems too, just to see how it behaved on different languages and stuff like that. So you can experiment as much as you want with it too. It is a tool, so
absolutely you can put it anywhere, but yeah, I guess the kind of standard practice
the full mix
to put it on the full mix.
That concludes our discussion or event. Any questions, get in contact with us. I just want to say again, yeah, big thanks to Kate, Freddie and Ozzy for your time and your knowledge and your experience in the industry, and constantly being on the ball with putting the forefront, the questions that need to be at the forefront of the conversation, unapologetically you bring them forward. So hopefully you guys will all be able to thank Dialogue Check to make your speech more intelligible in the future, not just yourselves, but the attendees as well.